Hi, welcome back to another episode of Women of Burbank. My name is Ashley Erikson, and I have Has Badalian-Collins here. She is a Burbank native and the Burbank AYSO Regional Commissioner. She has a heart for volunteerism and a heart that has been on a scary medical journey, which we're going to talk all about today. But first, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Ashley.
Yeah. So you've been born and raised in Burbank. Tell me what that's been like. What has been the difference in being a child versus now, and that whole.
Yeah, I'll say I don't know that I remember much about. I remember growing up here, but people, I think our kids all do a project about someone who's lived in Burbank for a long time, and they'll ask what was it like 40 years ago? I'm like, I don't really remember. I remember walking to the mall. I remember just general safety of the city, but I couldn't tell you when people are like, oh, there used to be a such and such on this corner of the street. I was like, I don't remember that. So I'm maybe not the best person to ask about that. I have a really good memory about some things, but that I don't. I remember there used to be a Tony Roma's on San Fernando.
Okay.
There used to be, oh gosh, I'm trying to remember. It was like not a Woolworths, maybe it was a Woolworths, like also on San Fernando. So I remember little things like that, but.
And the AMC wasn't there, right?
No, the AMC was there. It was on, if it was Palm maybe or something like that. That whole area obviously was different.
Yeah.
And it was one AMC on that street, and then they kind of redid it and then broke it up into three. And so I remember that. Yeah. But I also think I grew up in like the hills of Burbank. It's actually technically almost even like Sun Valley, like our across the street neighbors in Burbank.
Like by the Cabrini.
Actually far more over, like off of Hollywood Way. So you couldn't just like walk out of your house and just start walking around because you'd have to go down a big hill. I do remember walking home from school once or twice when my mom forgot to pick me up. Or like maybe she didn't, but I didn't have a phone. Yeah. So, and I remember like walking up our hill thinking like, this is really steep. But so like you weren't really walking around. Whereas like my kids right now could easily walk out of our house and just kind of walk to the local, whatever used to be the Rite Aid. And so it was just given where we lived, it was not a super walkable place. So I can't really tell you, honestly.
What schools did you go to?
I went to St. Francis Xavier up in the hills of Burbank. And then after that, I went to Notre Dame High School in Sherman Oaks.
Okay.
And I've been fairly local, but for like a small stint outside of LA, still in Southern California to go to law school. But I've been here pretty much my whole life. And then we actually, at some point, my husband and I lived in Santa Monica. And then we realized, oh, that's like really far from my parents. And
Are they still here?
Yeah. So my dad passed away 15 years ago, but my mom is still here. She still lives in the same house we grew up in. Yeah. So that's kind of funny. But, so it's like, you're like, once you start realizing like, oh, I might need to see my parents more often.
Yeah, especially after having kids and needing that extra help. Yeah.
Exactly.
I was going to ask what brought you back, because you left for law school. You went to UCLA and San Diego for schooling.
Yes. I went to UCLA for undergrad and master's, and then I went to University of San Diego for law school. Came back, got married, and my husband and I lived in Santa Monica. We actually moved back to the area before having kids. I think just my dad was sick at the time. Like I think it was a long drive to come here from Santa Monica to visit. So we moved back and we lived in Studio City for a few years. Like 3 blocks outside of Burbank, essentially. Yeah. So we were there. We had our first child while we were in Studio City, and we were at a townhouse. And then I realized, and it was a 3-story walk up with a subterranean parking.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah. So you pull up and you've got a kid in a car seat and you're like, I got to walk up those stairs. Then I got to walk up those stairs, and I got a car seat and I have a stroller. So that lasted for about 2 years. And I was like, Miles, we need a 1-story house. I want to be able to pull into my driveway and just kind of be there. So, so that's really what brought us back to Burbank. But that's like, I was thinking, hey, we'll get a house like in the Valley Village area. It's kind of where I went to high school. And, and I was like, I'm not going back to Burbank. I grew up in Burbank. I want something different.
You're done. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I was totally done.
Yeah.
And then
something in Burbank brings people back.
Well, I was tricked. That's what I say. So our real estate agent at the time was someone I went to high school with. And I had said to him, I was like, Mike, you can find me a house in this general vicinity, but it can't be in Burbank. And
funny.
And he goes, why? And I was like, cuz like I can't be the person who like lives in the city they grew up in or was born in, right? Like that can't be me. And he was like, okay, fine. So we went, we looked at a bunch of places. We looked at a bunch of places like, what is it, Toluca Terrace, like the area just right next to it. And it was all just whatever. And so one day he calls, he goes, hey, can you meet me at this house? And it was like after work. And I'm like, okay, well, where is it? And he's like, I'll just send you the address. I go, Mike, where is it? He's like, I'll just send you the address. So he sends the address and I'm like, and so we go and it's like 5 or 6 p.m. and this house has skylights in the living room. So you walk in and it's like the beautiful sun setting and the lights hitting that. I know.
Perfect.
He totally,
right?
He totally tricked me.
Yeah.
He tricked me and I walked in and I was like, okay, so this is the house and it's 2 blocks into Burbank from the edge. And I was like, oh my gosh. But that's how we ended up in Burbank. I fought it tooth and nail. And then we ended up here and I was like, oh, this is where I was meant to be.
That is so funny. I wonder if that's everyone else's story. They try to break
I know.
away. I grew up in Glendale, so I didn't get very far.
You didn't. You're like, I'm 2 blocks in from the other side of Burbank.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it is funny. It was despite my efforts. Yeah. And now I'm like, why would I want to live in Toluca Terrace? Like, that's crazy. Why do I want City of LA, services? Like, obviously, but, I was young and I think I was like,
no one wants to be the kid that like stayed here in their hometown, right?
Exactly.
And your hometown's Burbank.
Yeah, but you also don't realize like, oh, the schools are great. Oh, the services are, you're not thinking that when you're in your 20s. Yeah. I mean, now I tell people that I go, don't live there, move 2 blocks here. But
yeah. So
no 20-year-olds listening to a 40-year-old or a 60-year-old, but so, here we are.
And then you became a prosecutor for LA.
Yeah, well, actually, I started off as a prosecutor in Orange County. Okay. And we were living in Santa Monica at the time, and that was quite a drive, but LADA's office wasn't hiring, so then I transferred to LA. Then I had children, so then I went into private practice for a few years, and I was representing cities and school districts, so it was always public entity, representation of public entities. It was never any.
How did you do that raising kids? It was hard. That's a big job. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
an exhausting job.
Yeah. I mean, I always joke I've always had very, very good bosses, but my one boss, when I was in private practice, who I love dearly, and I still, relatively communicate with him here and there, I would always say to him, I was like, well, the employee you have now is not who you would have had before children. Like, that is a very different employee.
Yeah.
I was like, but I'll get the stuff done in a shorter period of time because that's what you have. And you just make it work. And, some days I can be a really, really good lawyer and some days I can be a really, really good mom. And there are very few days where I can do both at the same time. Yeah. So you just kind of pick your battles and you pick your days. And some days, I luckily have a very helpful and supportive husband. And I'll say, hey, I need you to be on today. Yeah. Like you're handling, especially if I'm in trial, I'll be like, you're handling from 5 a.m. until midnight. You will not see me. Yeah. I'll see you on Friday, So as long as you have someone like that who's helpful and maybe their job is also something that's conducive to that,
right? That
works. But if you don't have that help, I don't know how it's possible.
Yeah. And so what are you doing now? Are you working the same amount of hours? And
well, so after private practice, I went in-house and I worked at the city of Pasadena. So that's really what that means. Like, so instead of having multiple clients, you have one client. So my client at that time became the city of Pasadena. And at this point, I had worked as a prosecutor. So I had sort of the experience and relationships with police and law enforcement. And I had worked for cities and schools, and they tend to have their own police department. So at some point I found that I was doing a lot of police work and employment work. And so when I went in-house to the city of Pasadena, I was like, well, this is what I would normally do. I would do the police department. And the man who used to represent police and was like advisory to police, he happened to retire literally like the day before I started. And so so I was hired to be like a generalist, but when I showed up, he wasn't there. They're like, well, we need a police person. I was like, oh, okay, well, that's me. That's actually exactly what I do. Wow. So it was kind of fortuitous.
Yeah.
Very fortuitous. So I represented Pasadena PD for about 4 years, and then I transferred to City of Los Angeles, where I did pretty much the exact same thing for about another 4 years, and then I just kind of transferred units, and I now work for police general counsel, which is no longer doing like litigation of police matters, but now we do advisory work for LAPD.
You're very busy, and you have 3 kids.
I do.
And you're working, and then you have so much volunteerism under your belt, which I don't understand how you can do all of these things.
That's the pot calling the kettle black.
I know, like, but I'm working from home in my pajamas and my computer. Like, you're all over the place.
Yeah, it's I always say, like, the time you need is the time you have, and the time you have is the time you need. You just kind of make it work. And,
it's really about time management. It really is. Everyone has the same amount of time. It's just what you use in those hours, right?
And it's never going to be perfect. It's not, no matter what, especially when you're talking about volunteerism. Like, my job has to be perfect because someone's paying me to do that. For volunteerism, I'm like, well, this is the best I can do with what I have.
Yeah.
If you don't want me, you can pick someone else.
Yeah.
No one will be there. But
and it's always volunteering is a team. Like, there's always a group of people that pick up the slack when you can't, right? Like, comes to the PTA, you're in the PTA.
Yep.
And the main thing you do is you're the regional commissioner for AYSO, which Region 254, which is Burbank, right?
Yep.
And how long have you been doing that?
So I started when my oldest was first started playing soccer at Region 254. So it must have been when he was 4. So 2014.
So you've been on the board for a long time?
So it's like the story of every volunteer thing. You go to register your child and they go, we really need volunteers. Can you sign up to do something? And I was like, okay, well, what do you need? And they're like, he's like, what, your child's going to be in schoolyard. Okay, we need a schoolyard coordinator. I was like, I don't know what that means, but okay, sure.
Yeah.
And so then all of a sudden you start getting all these emails about board things, and they're like, oh, I'm on a board. This isn't just like I'm a team parent,
Right. You, like, give me my task and let me go. No, this is
this. And so it was a lot of figure it out. Like, what am I supposed to do? How does this work? So I started off when he was about 4. So it's been 10 years on the board of like not knowing what I was doing.
Yeah.
And I was the schoolyard coordinator. And then, of course, that child gets older and now moves up to like U6. So then I was the U6 coordinator. And then he goes into U8. And so you're the U8 coordinator, So, and it is, I mean, especially AYSO, they're always looking for help anyway. So if you're willing to do something, they're like, great. Yeah. We'll take your help. So, yeah.
And the crazy part is that you don't have a child in AYSO anymore.
Not anymore. I do.
And you are leading the whole thing.
I am.
And you've been regional commissioner for 3 years?
This is my 3rd season. 3rd and hopefully last. Whoever's listening, there will be an opening.
Okay.
I'm hoping to pass this on. I really need someone to step up.
Yeah. I don't know how you can do this. First of all, how did you go from these positions to leading this whole organization?
So I think we got to about, I want to say U10. My husband and I have always like kind of tag teamed these divisions.
He's on the board too, right?
Oh, he is. So he currently is doing field. So he ends up scheduling practices, and he's the liaison between like the city and because we use city fields and we use school district fields. So he's the liaison between the city and the school and us, and trying to figure that out, getting permits, making sure everyone's got a practice space. So that's what he does now. Previously, before this year, before we got a game scheduler, he was also doing the game schedule. So our tasks have changed over a period of time. And so we got to about U10, and I remember someone called me and was like, hey, I really need, the person who was the game scheduler for a while, he left to go to AYSO in Glendale. So I was like, oh, and they're like, we really need a game scheduler. And I was like, I mean, I could be the game scheduler, I guess. When someone says I really need, I'm like, okay, I can't say no. And I was like, what's going to happen if no one schedules, no one has a game? I should learn that they will find someone.
I am the same boat. The awkward silence when they ask, and I'm like, oh my gosh, my hand is moving up. Like, no, they will find somebody.
Know, they will. I've gotten much better. I'd say in the last 3 years, I've gotten much better being like, okay, so who's it going to be, guys? Because not going to be me.
Yeah. You put your time in.
And I feel like it's a little bit of that. It's a little bit of realizing that whatever organization you're a part of needs new blood. It can't be the same 5 people because it starts to get stale and the organization doesn't grow. So that's helped me realize I'm actually doing the organization a favor by not jumping in and filling that spot, but that I'm there as a backstop if, things are really, really bad and they need somebody. Yeah. So in that sense, I have gotten much better. And my husband does joke and say, if you volunteer for one more thing.
I've heard that line too.
Yeah, and he's just like, we were just recently at this like choir thing and someone's like, can I talk to you about, X, Y, or Z? And he's looking at me and like, do not walk over there. Yeah. And I'm like, oh my gosh, Miles, you're horrible.
Well, I said that this year after being PTA president. I was like, I'm saying no to everything. And I did say no multiple times.
And then what popped up?
But they just keep coming.
They do.
Luther PTA, Burroughs PTA. And I was like, this is my year of no.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard. Yeah. I have a really, really, really good friend. I call her my life wife. But she's very similar. We're like cut from the same cloth. And, and I'll see that happening to her. And I was like, nuh-uh. No, Sarah, you can't do that. You're not saying yes to that. And she's just looking at me going like, wait a minute. I was like, it's a lot easier to tell someone else not to do that.
Yeah.
But yeah. So I decided, I was like, okay, I'll be the game scheduler. And then in the middle of that, I think the person who is purchasing, so that's the person who purchases uniforms and uniforms, balls, all that kind of stuff. That person quit. So like, we desperately need a purchaser.
You're taking all of these positions in the same year?
Yes.
Oh,
so
my gosh.
There were about maybe 3 seasons where I did both of those at the same time.
Wow.
That is not a job that one person should have. They should very, very obviously should be 2 people. And we currently have 2 separate people doing it. And guess what? They are both busy full-time because those are full-time positions that should be handled separately. So I did that. And then, I guess it was about 3 years ago. 3 years ago around Thanksgiving, actually, we had some discord on our board. There was without getting into too much of the nitty gritty, because I feel like that could be a podcast episode on its own that no one else besides me would be interested in.
I don't know. People love the tea.
Yeah, maybe. But I thought it became clear that we needed a change. Right. And, and it's like my mom's always taught me, like, don't complain about something unless you're willing to jump in and either offer a solution or fix it.
Yeah.
And because I was always like, I am not doing that job. That is not something I want. And I've got 3 kids and there are, especially as you now know, when your kid's playing soccer, that's your entire Saturday is gone. So if you have that plus the job of a regional commissioner, you never leave the field. Yes, I never get to see my own kids play.
Yeah.
So I kept fighting it. I was like, no, it's not what I'm going to do. I'm not going to do that. But then I was like, okay, well, this will not change unless we see meaningful change, unless we see a person who's going to take it over, who's not. And I looked over and I was like, there were plenty of people around that would have been good at that job, but no one else, again, same thing. No one else is stepping up to do it that I thought would do the job well.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, my other flaw, where I look at something and I go, well, that can be done better.
Yeah.
And that's not to say there aren't things right now in the region that cannot be done. Of course they can, right? It's like, it's not my paid job. I don't get a penny for what I do. So yes, if I was paid to do this, it could be done way better. But I certainly think that there were things that needed to be done better.
Yeah. You saw some holes and gaps and you wanted to go in and close them and fix them.
At least like some major ones. Like, it's like, I can't fix everything, but there are some major things. Especially, I think we needed to rebuild the trust that we had with our community. And so those were kind of the big things that I wanted to hit. And so I threw my name in and here we are 3 years later. It is a 3-year stint.
Oh, it is?
It is. So, well, I think you could be elected for probably all 3, right? 1, a 2, or a 3. But at that particular time, I was elected for a 3-year stint.
Oh, gosh. That's like a big commitment to like jump into.
Yes. And I think in my head, I kept saying like, well, I can always just do it for 1 and resign if I need to. True. But like, that's not me.
You're not a quitter.
No. So I was like, worst comes to worst, like this is what I could do. But like if it's like the worst thing in the world. And it hasn't been. I mean, in reality, it's a lot of work. But at the same time, I have met so many great people.
Right.
And our board you just develop friendships and relationships with people that you wouldn't otherwise.
That's why I do PTA. I don't do
100%.
it for my kids. They don't even know what I'm doing or what it's for, but 100%. I just do it for the parents.
Well, clearly I'm not doing AYSO for my kids. So that is not. So, it's funny. People do ask that. They go like, why would you do this when your kids are not on it? I said, I will say something. There is something very nice about besides just doing something for the community or whatever, but because that's very important. But I know that anytime I make a decision, it is not self-interested whatsoever. Yeah. Like there is no way that I can say, I picked this team versus this team because my kid's on that team. Right. Like I know in my heart of hearts that every decision I make is a neutral decision that doesn't help me in any way whatsoever or hurt me in any way whatsoever. And so I'm not bending over backwards to not help my kids, but I'm also not doing something that's self-interested to their benefit. So in that sense, it's been great. I think that there's a true benefit to having someone like that in that position who doesn't have a kid who's involved. I mean, there's plenty of regions that have regional commissioners whose kids have graduated, moved on, and they're the regional commissioner, and they haven't had kids on there for years. Yeah. So I think that I don't want to say that's the norm, but it's certainly a thing. Yeah.
Well, there's a couple of people on the board that don't have kids in this.
Oh, yes. Yeah. But I was saying more like as a regional commissioner to do that. Yes, I think there are. Biggest job. Yeah. So there definitely are. And I probably would recommend that. But at the same time, I think that you certainly could do the job. You just have to be very, very mindful of the fact that when you do have children that are in the region, that's going to be looked at very critically. You have to be mindful of that, and you have to be mindful of the fact that you have to make sure that the decisions you're making are what's in the best interest of the community and the region, and not yourself. So, yeah.
So what are you going to do when you're not regional commissioner?
I don't know. There's not a time in my life where I haven't had a passion project. So I'm sure I'll do something.
Are you in PTA right now?
I am. So for a while I was PTA president at Roosevelt. I just finished up a 2-year PTA president stint at Dolores Huerta Middle School.
So wait, you were PTA president and regional commissioner simultaneously.
Not intentional. I always joke and say it's because no one wanted to be president at Dolores.
I know. Yeah.
So I was like, I'm the reluctant president. I didn't want that job either. I didn't want this job either.
I don't think anyone really does want that job.
Especially in middle school, like it's not like the funnest time. There aren't like a ton of fun events.
You can't really be on the campus very much.
No. You're not like planning events or anything. No. And the 2 years that I did it at Roosevelt was 2020.
You were the same as me.
2021. Yes.
I was 19, 20, 2021.
So
COVID hit during my presidency. Yes. Yeah, that's why I went back for one more year just to redeem myself.
Yeah, you needed
I was
that.
I want a full year.
I know, and I didn't have that. I had one full year of us all at home. Yeah, and then the other year where it's we were really limited in what we could do, and everything had to be outside. So there was a lot of stuff that happened. And I totally understand I want to redeem myself. I always joke to whoever's the president at the moment. I go, we couldn't do that then either. I'm sorry, but.
Well, maybe you can redeem yourself and be president again or something. Maybe you'll go back to Roosevelt and be president.
But remember what I said. Things get stale. Young blood is great. I think that if you can get some younger parents who are, and not that I'm saying I'm old, but
I want them to be there for a long time.
Yes. Yeah. My third kid is in 4th grade. Yeah. He's leaving soon. I'm always there as a stopgap. Hey, this is just how we've done it. Or this is something for you to consider. It's good to have that institutional knowledge who's still at the school and willing to help. But really someone else, it's like I say, it shouldn't be the Clintons and the Bushes. It's I don't need the same 4 names being recycled.
Rotated over,
go find someone else. So, and it's in a school of 500-600 families. Yeah. You should be able to find at least a few.
So you're at elementary, middle school, and high school?
For 2 years.
How was your drop-off going?
I thought it was going to be worse because, luckily, my oldest is taking a 0 period, so that helps a little bit.
Yes, that spaces it out.
And then my middle one, he's walking to a friend's house, and that the mom, which is
Okay.
one of our good friends, is taking him to school and dropping off because that Dolores were to drop. I mean, as you know, middle school drop
Oh, yeah.
off.
We're close enough for walking,
Yes.
which thank goodness, because
Yes.
there's no point. You're
No.
blocks away.
It's horrible. And whereas Burroughs has been pretty good, and maybe
Yes.
because it's zero period and there aren't a million people.
Yeah, even it took 2 years to find the spot I needed to drop off.
Yes.
Because we
And
kept
you
trying
eventually
like
do.
this block for a while and this block, and then we found the sweet spot. And we're like,
And then you're like,
okay.
how has no one found this spot?
Yes, like they're all down that other
I
way, and
know.
I'm like, don't tell anybody.
And don't tell. This is the private spot.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've been able to drop him off without an issue. And then our third, he starts at 8:30. So that's been actually nice. So I do the Burroughs drop off, I come back, and then we walk him to school, which
Oh,
I
that's
haven't been able to do
nice.
for 3 years since we were remodeling our house and
Yeah.
not at our house. So
Isn't it fun? Like
Yeah.
as soon as you get into a routine, though, like something gets thrown into it.
Oh,
It's
yes.
like just for now, things are nice,
This
and I'm
is
going
how
to
it works.
appreciate it, right?
yeah, totally.
Yeah.
So it's been good. I can't
So
complain.
you don't have anything on the radar in terms of like what's next.
Well, I mean, I think anytime your kids are into something new, that's always a good place to just jump in and do
Yeah.
something. I think all of my volunteerism has always been focused on something kid related,
Mm-hmm.
just because they are so much more pleasant to hang out with. They are
Yeah.
the best part of anything
They're
you
so
do.
appreciative.
They're appreciative. They're fun. It's like they're light. They're like life is lighter, so they're not coming at you with a ton of extra baggage.
Yeah.
It just is for the most part. There's plenty of kids who've got stuff going on at home, but
Yeah.
I don't know. So my oldest, who just started at Burroughs, he is in the choir. So there's
Oh,
plenty of
yeah.
opportunities there. Assuming that's something that I'm ready to jump into. We'll see. And I
Yeah.
kept saying like no because
You've got your playful.
the
yeah.
AYSO position takes up a ton of time.
Yeah.
And so I was like, well, maybe when that's over, we can talk about it.
Oh, the choir's listening. If anyone,
I know.
they're
Oh,
they're
they've
waiting in the
already-
wings.
They've already tried. And the other thing I say is like, it's got to be a position that suits you and works to your strengths, right?
Right.
Don't try
100%.
to, don't take on the task that's going to really task you,
Yeah.
And everyone's strong at different things,
Yeah.
So do the thing that you're really good at. And so there have been some things that have popped up where I'm just like, you don't want me to do that. That is
Yeah.
that doesn't work to my strength. Usually something that requires me to be somewhere all the time,
Mhm.
that's not to my strength. I have a full-time job.
Yeah.
So it's like I gotta find things where I can do it at night. I can organize it here, there, whatever it is. So
Delegation.
exactly.
Yeah, I'm a good delegator. I can't just sit there.
Yeah, I don't know that I'm a great delegator.
Really? Do
Yeah.
you want to do it yourself because you think you can do it better?
I think it's a little bit of that, and it is a little bit of, then A, it's done the way I want it, and then B, I can only blame myself if I
That's
did it
true.
incorrectly.
That is true.
So
Yeah.
that's a problem, but
Yeah.
that's okay as long as I can do it on my own time.
Yeah.
I'm routinely up until 2-3 o'clock in the morning doing work, so that's okay.
I used to be like that, and now it's like 9 o'clock hits, and I'm like, well, I'm ready to go to
Catches
bed.
up with you. I'm waiting for
so
that.
tired.
It's gonna happen.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm hoping it hits me in like my 70s. Like if I can have some
Yeah,
time,
just don't slow down, and then you'll be fine. I think
that's the hope.
Yeah.
So we'll see. We got that. One other thing I've always really wanted to do, but I don't say a little bit of pushback, but it's just anytime you're talking about starting something new, it's just kind of like, there's just so much.
Yeah.
But so when I was in college, law school, I was part of the mock trial team at UCLA and University of San Diego. And so even after I graduated from law school, when I was in law school, I was helping coach our teams over there, helping coach the UCLA team. We actually started the program at Notre Dame High School, where I was my alma mater. And when I was working in Orange County, I was coaching one of the Catholic schools down there. So I would love to start a program like that at one of really we should have one at the middle schools and the high schools.
I'm surprised they don't have that.
I think Burbank High does, but my kids don't go to Burbank High.
Mhm.
So I think we need one at Dolores Huerta or Luther or.
Yeah.
And then I think Burroughs needs to have it. So they have teen court or something similar
Yes.
to that,
Yeah.
but that's very different.
Okay.
We really should have it in a city full of performers
Mhm.
and super smart children. Like I think that this is, there are kids there. So the program, the way it works is you have some people who are witnesses and they're essentially just acting. And then you've got people who are attorneys who, like I always tell people, I'm like, part of being an attorney is just acting. Like you're just playing a part. So in a city of actors, we should have a mock trial program and we should be really good.
That would be really fun.
Maybe when I finish this stint,
Yeah.
and someone takes over, that'll be the thing. And I don't think my kid is interested in it at all. So that'll be another.
So funny that like my kid like wants nothing to do with school. Like all his stuff is after school.
Yeah.
And I'm like working the concession stands at the football game, like doing all these things, and I'm just like all alone. My kids are nowhere to be found.
I know. That's kind of how it goes. And I don't know that any of my kids would be interested in it. I was like, I don't really care.
But you're interested in it. And you're going to touch people's lives that are interested in it. And that's the whole point, right?
I can't even tell you. Like, this is how you know you feel old. So kids that I coached who were freshmen, sophomore, juniors, and seniors at Notre Dame High School, we're on, friends on Instagram now. And I look at them, I go, oh, you're pregnant. Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that was a long time ago that I coached you. You are now having your own child. Like, this is a little freaky.
That's so funny.
So, yeah, it's... You definitely, and then they'll reach out and they'll say like, hey, can I have a recommendation letter for law school or for this job? And I was like, can I just talk you out of it? Like, maybe you need an easier job. This is not an easy job. Like go do something that's like, it takes up a little less time, a little less stress.
Yeah.
They never listen to me. Never. No. I've never been able to talk.
Everyone has to learn the hard way in life. That's how it is.
I'll just say I've never been able to talk someone out of law school. And then they go to law school and I go, oh, you're a lawyer. That's so great. Good for you.
Call me in a few years and we'll cry together.
Exactly. When you have your first kid and you realize, oh, this is harder than I thought.
Yeah.
So yes, you do end up, like touching a lot of kids' lives and they don't forget you.
Yeah.
I mean, I've received so many and they'll always be like, I don't know if you remember me. I was like, of course I remember you. What do you mean? If I remember you, like, of course I remember you. But it's
those little tiny moments that impact people.
Yeah.
Can change their whole life. A good teacher can change everything. And a bad teacher can change everything.
Yes.
I took a journalism class at PCC and like failed it. I was like, she was so mean. I was like, I'm never doing this ever again.
I'm sorry.
And went into biology. And obviously that didn't work either.
How'd that work out for you, Ashley? Well, I don't think you do.
I had a baby and I was like, I can't be a biologist and a mom. I don't want to do that.
I was like, I don't think she does anything in biology right now.
So then I went back for English.
Yeah. No, I get it. And I don't know that a bad teacher would have pushed me away from what I wanted to do. Yeah. But I also don't think that I ended up doing exactly what I don't even know what I wanted to do. So
I still don't even know what I want to do. I'm like, I wonder what I'm going to be in a few years.
Yeah.
I have no idea.
When I grow up.
Yes. You never know. You can be many things in your life.
I hope so. When you see like, I don't know, like a Facebook thing or an Instagram thing that says like, so-and-so started running at 45 and now they won the marathon. You're like, wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
There's hope for us all.
That's amazing.
But people becoming actors like in their 60s,
Yeah, my husband's like former roommate, like when they were in their 20s, decided to take up like painting in his, I guess he must not have been that old at the time, but maybe like in his 30s, like had never painted before. And just, I don't know what it was. Like he just decided. And now he's like doing paintings and selling them and commissioning. And like, so he's an artist. Like that's literally what he does now. And I'm thinking, isn't that weird how a thing, an activity that you had never crossed your mind and you may never do it. And that's what you're intended to do.
Yeah.
And you don't discover
like everything needed to lead up to build you into that person you were in that moment,
that's the hope. Or what if you like just never picked up that paintbrush?
True. Well, it's fate. You would. Have
Do you
to
think
right?
So?
It has
I don't know. I'm thinking I'm supposed to be some like.
So that means you have to try everything to see if you're good at it.
That's a lot of things to try, Ashley.
Yeah. I just tried line dancing. You should come line dancing. That's been fun.
I like line dancing.
Oh my gosh. It's my new favorite thing in the world.
We actually learned line dancing in elementary school at St. Francis Xavier.
Really?
Yeah. And I'm trying to remember why, but we
PE? I had a friend who did it for PE in the Bay Area.
It might have been. But I'm old enough that we had art and music and dance at school. So it may have been a dance class at school.
Yeah.
Because I distinctly remember having things that like I was like,
I just assumed it was part of it. Like I was in a choir in elementary. It was choir.
It was part of it.
Yeah, and we had instruments and we had drill team. I was at Mark Keppel, which is now a magnet school, but it wasn't a magnet school then. And you just joined the programs, and it would be like 0 period almost. You'd go before school.
Oh, yours was before. Ours was during the school day.
Oh, yeah, ours was always before or after.
Yeah, I think after was like cheerleading and volleyball, but like for the most part, like I distinctly remember music being in the middle of the school day.
Yeah.
And dance being in the middle of the school day. And it was great because then the boys had to do it because it
Mhm.
was part of your class. And so then
Yeah.
they're just like weird and awkward and don't want to dance. And you're like, this is great.
This is so fun.
Uh-huh.
Well, I want to talk a little bit about your heart. We talked about your heart of volunteerism, but you have had some really scary issues when you were pregnant.
Yes.
Tell me what happened.
Oh boy. So going back probably, so what was that, 14 years ago. So I was 15 years ago because I was pregnant with my first. I started having, it was really bizarre, like just a really bad headache and fever, and I was like shaking, and at this point I was, I'll say this, 20 weeks pregnant. And
you just assume it's pregnancy stuff?
Well, I didn't assume it was pregnancy stuff, but I'm very, very good at saying, like, this isn't normal. We're going to the hospital.
Yeah.
Like, I don't sit around and wait. Like, that is not my thing at all. So I made my husband take me in, and they were like, oh, it's just the flu.
Did you go to St. Joe's?
No, I went to Kaiser.
Oh, okay.
It's Kaiser Sunset. And they're like, no, it's just the flu. And I was like, I've never had the flu before. Never. Not once.
Really?
Never. I know. Isn't that weird?
Yeah.
I get a cold once or twice a year, but I have never had the flu. So exactly.
One.
And they're like, well, you're pregnant, so your immune system's low.
Yeah.
You probably have the flu. And I was like, no, I don't think I have the flu. But so they sent me home. And then I went back again, like the next day. And I was like, yeah, things aren't better.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what to tell you. They're like, well, and I think at that point maybe they took some blood or did some cultures, and then they sent me back home. And then so this is now like 2 days in. My fever's still up, and I'm thinking, like, this isn't right. Like, this is not normal. So I went in and I was like, I am not leaving until you figure out what's wrong with me.
Good for you.
And I'm like crying just out of pain. Like, my head hurts so badly. And Miles and I always joke about this because, like, at that point, one of the nurses sees me and she's just like, oh, honey, let's go get some apple juice. And so now we always joke about that when there's something major. I think let's go get some apple juice. It is. So it's funny now. It was not at that time, but let's go get some apple juice. So we go in, and they do end up, because then now they're worried meningitis, and I'm like, why weren't you worried about meningitis 2 days ago? I could be dead by now, So they end up doing a spinal tap. They do this, that, and then whatever. They eventually figure out that I had a very rare case of endocarditis, which is essentially an infection of I guess it could be an infection of anything, but for me, it was an infection of my heart valve.
Wow.
So
I don't even think that is a possible thing.
It is not a thing most people know.
No.
And they would always go like, endocarditis, like anyone who'd walk in, they'd be like, endocarditis, like, and then I eventually figured out why they'd give me that look, because it's often something that you get when you're an IV drug user from like dirty needles, because you're getting infection into your bloodstream. And so eventually I figured it out. I was like, so they'd say endocarditis, and I'd be like, I'm not a IV drug user. Like, and they'd come over and they'd like start looking.
No.
Yes, because it is not a common thing.
Yeah.
So they figure out, so it's like the heart valve, it's like it opens and closes and opens and closes. And essentially, you want your heart valve, this is all explained to me in layman's terms. So anyone who's listening, if I'm explaining it incorrectly, I'm sorry. I'm a lawyer, not a doctor. But you kind of want it to close like a door, like flat up against the frame. So when you have what's called mitral valve prolapse, the valve either closes like this or like this, where it's like not fully flat and flush with what it should be. And when that happens, it is more susceptible to getting infected. And at the time I was pregnant, so your immune system is lower, and potentially there was an infection in my body somehow.
Yeah.
And so it goes down your bloodstream and then it gets infected. And usually your body fights the infection and it goes away. This was to the point where it was so infected that your body's not able to fight it. So it's just very infected. And so they go, okay, so we're going to put you on IV antibiotics, and you should be okay, and you should be able to leave in 10 days. Okay. So we're there for 10 days.
Wow.
Well, we're there for 10 days. And on the 10th day, they go, 10th day we're there, and they put in what's called a PICC line, which is like a line that goes in so when we go home, they can send us home with antibiotics, and it'll go directly into the bloodstream. And while they're doing that, all of a sudden, like the left side of my body goes numb.
Oh my gosh.
And so what we did learn is the headaches that I was having And the fever that I was having were all little mini strokes because the infection, like every time your valve opens and closes, it's just like going like this. And so it's like spewing infection that goes to your brain. So that's what the headaches were. And that's what was causing the fever and stuff. So what they learned at that day when the left side of my body went completely numb is that one of those emboli, so that's what they call it, was big and large enough that it went to my brain and it paralyzed the left side of my body. So then they're like, okay, clearly the IV antibiotics is not working. So we have to go in. And so that day they determined they're going to go in.
You were pregnant.
Oh, I'm pregnant. This is the true complicating issue. So they decide within 24 hours we need to go in and we need to either clean out the valve, like get the infection off of it, or give you a new valve. And it has to happen now. And, so it's just a lot that's happening. And by the way, you're pregnant. Oh, and by the way, part of the surgery is stopping your heart.
Oh my gosh.
And you've got a baby inside of you. And so
how many months were you?
When I went in, I was 20 weeks.
Oh yeah. So it's not like you can do an early,
No. And
oh my gosh.
So it's all funny you say those things because it was, by the time I had the surgery, I was 23 weeks and 5 days.
Wow.
And so it was, and they said, well, there's, about a 50% chance the baby survives. And so, they're just giving you facts. So I was like, okay, because they're going to have to stop the heart, but they're going to have to monitor the baby. They're going to, so all this sort of stuff. So anyway, long story short, have surgery. They're able to replace it. And they don't really they don't stop your heart and have surgery when you're pregnant for the most part, right? Like that's not something you want to do to a patient. Usually you'll say, have the baby come back. Right. But this is not an option.
Time crunch,
Right. So it was, I'm incredibly lucky. Like I had a friend who's an anesthesiologist in San Diego who was reaching out to he had done a fellowship in Harvard for anesthesiology. He's calling his friend at, Harvard, hey, how do we deal with this with a pregnant baby, pregnant baby or pregnant child with a baby? And we're going to have to stop the heart and you have to go on bypass and, all this stuff. So, it was a lot of people working on one person. And so you're very, very thankful for just the time and attention and care that people give to you. But he survived.
Oh, it's amazing.
He totally survived.
Did he go full term?
Well, he did go full. So we had the surgery 23 weeks and 5 days. And I'll never forget my maternal fetal medicine doctor at the time. So, had graduated from having a regular OB to someone who does high risk pregnancies because they're like, oh, this is not going to be a normal pregnancy.
Yeah.
So he came in and he's like, well, we sort of lost track of the baby's heartbeat for about 10 minutes of that.
Oh my gosh.
And he's like, so, one of two things, either the baby just didn't have oxygen for that period of time and maybe there was some issues because, or maybe we just couldn't find the baby's heartbeat, that happens. And we're like, okay, so what does that mean? He's like, well, I would normally just have you come back in a week and just make sure the brain is growing at the rate we expect it to. If you're 24 weeks, the brain is this big. And if you're 25, it's grown more. So that's what we would normally do. He's like, but you're 23 weeks and 5 days. You cannot come back in 1 week and make a different decision. So you have 48 hours to make a decision. So it was, and of course, I'm straight out of cardiac surgery. I'm under anesthesia. And I'm looking at my husband going, I can't make this decision. You're just going to have to decide.
Wow.
So we call him our miracle baby.
Aww.
So he, obviously, we chose to keep the pregnancy. And he did go full term.
And came out healthy.
And then, of course, so after surgery, I still came home with a PICC line. I still had a ton of antibiotics.
Yeah.
And so my mom's like, this baby is going to be who knows, radioactive. I don't know.
That's amazing.
And it's so fun. So that's what's funny to me now is when people are like, oh, I don't think I can take Tylenol during pregnancy. I go, let me tell you what you can do during pregnancy.
Yeah.
And you'll be fine. The number of MRIs I had, the number of x-rays, CT, you name it.
You gotta do what you gotta do.
You do, but I'm like, he's fine.
Yeah.
You'll be fine, So he came out 10 fingers, 10 toes, but my mom was very concerned. Yes. And I was like, we're in America. It'll be fine. But the funny story is the first, when they pee for the first time, he peed and I was like, oh my gosh, I can smell the antibiotics. Like,
oh, wow.
And I mean, and at that point it had been months since my last dose of antibiotic. But when he peed, I was like, oh yeah, that is very much the smell of antibiotics. So that kid, who knows, he got like 1 million doses of antibiotics.
Maybe he's just going to be like immune to everything.
He's just going to be strong.
Yes.
And now he's like a toothpick. He's like 100 pounds. But yeah, so it was really funny.
And then you had another surgery just recently.
I did. So they replaced that and so they couldn't repair it. So they couldn't like clean it out and just leave it the way that it was. They replaced it, and they replaced it with a PIG valve. It's a tissue valve, they call it. And the reason they decided that was the cardiologist was like, look, if this is my daughter and you're going to have more children, you need to be on a tissue valve because then you don't have to take blood thinners. Like you don't have to take Coumadin. And he's like, as soon as you go to mechanical, you're going to have to take Coumadin. So we went with a tissue valve. And the downside for a tissue valve is that it has a limited lifetime. So we always knew, like he said, it's like a 12 to 15 year. He's like, that's the lifespan. He's like, but you're young. And he might have even said 15 to 20. I don't remember. He's like, but you're young. He's like, so that's going to be even shorter. You're running around more. You're having babies.
Yeah.
It's taxing on your body.
Yeah.
So it's not going to be your 15 to 20. It's going to be your 10 to 12, whatever. So in my brain, it was going to be 10 to 12 years. So my son turned 13 and, I've been going in for checkups and my cardiologist is like, it looks as good as the day we put it in. Like, and so I'm like, oh, this is great. Fabulous.
Yeah.
And I go do my checkups and everything and not a real issue. And then all of a sudden, like it's been, I think at that point, like 13 and a half years. And I'm just.
Its limits.
Yeah. But like, just 2 months before I was totally fine.
That's crazy.
I know that's what's
so
really
your checkup
scary.
was fine and then something happened?
Checkup was totally fine. And then I'm sitting at a deposition at work where, it's like a room, there's a court reporter, there's my client, there's me, there's opposing counsel, and they're asking questions. And, I had walked over there, and on the walk over, I was kind of like, I'm a little like short of breath. Like, this is a little weird. It was September, and I was like, it's a little hot. I guess it might just be because it's hot. I don't think anything of it. But then in the middle of the deposition, I start getting a headache, and I'm like, oh, I didn't have coffee. Like, maybe I just need to get some coffee.
Mm-hmm.
I walk over to get coffee and I'm like short of breath. I'm like, this is really bizarre. But I was like, I just need to get through this. Like I had taken a while to schedule this thing. And I was like, I need to get this poor man away from this and be done because it's stressful, taxing thing. He doesn't need to come back. And so during the course of that, I could just feel that it was harder and harder for me to get a sentence out.
Wow.
Like, I had to keep, like, whatever I was talking, I had to keep it to, like, 3 words.
Yeah.
Which I guess is great for the other side. But for me, I was like, wait a minute. And so we wrapped up. And then I looked at my client. I was like, I need you to drive me to my car. And he's like, what? And I said, and I need you to hold this. And it was, like, my computer and my file. And it wasn't very heavy. And he's looking at me. He goes, are you okay? And I go, I'm not okay.
Yeah.
I was like, but I'm going to the hospital and we're in downtown LA. He goes, why don't I just call an ambulance? I said, because then they're going to take me to Good Samaritan. And I don't want to be a Good Samaritan. I want to be at Kaiser Sunset, which is like the number one preeminent, heart surgery center and I didn't know that's what was going on. I was like, but all my files are there.
Yeah.
I mean, if they just pull up my medical record number, it's all there. So anyway, so he drives me to my car and he's like, are you going to be okay? And I was like, I have to be okay. So, and
You drove yourself there?
I did. I totally drove myself. And I don't know that I would recommend that. Actually, the drive there was fine because I was sitting and not talking.
Yeah.
And the things you don't think about, like it was the walk from my car to the front of urgent care where I was like, that took me like 10 minutes.
Wow.
Where otherwise would have been like a 1 minute walk. But I was just like taking really small steps and I got there and I was it was cardiac failure. Like it was just my blood pressure was through the roof.
It's insane that 2 months difference.
Oh yeah.
That's crazy.
And I think from what I understand that it's a tissue valve, right? So it's like, it's almost like a rose, like a leaf or something like that, where it's just like, it just tore. Like it just
one moment.
Just one moment.
Yeah.
And I think just after a while, maybe just from the environment inside your body. It just wears thin and then it tears. So, and you've got fluids that are just rushing into places that shouldn't be there. So my lungs are filling with fluid. And
they did emergency surgery, or you planned it?
No, why would it be that simple, Ashley? Nothing in my life is that simple.
At least you weren't pregnant this time.
I know, and let me tell you, huge difference.
Yeah.
I mean, now you have the issue of I have 3 children. You can't mess up,
Yes, yeah. There's a lot at stake right now.
Whereas before I was like, I have no children. Like, I mean, I guess my husband won't have a wife, but it's a little different. But yeah, so they tried to wait to get me stable because obviously emergency cardiac surgery is not what you want.
Yeah.
So they waited to get me stable, and then I wanted a particular surgeon, and then they were waiting to see if they could fit me in with his schedule, but he was leaving on vacation. So eventually we were able to land on a surgeon, and it was right around the time that actually it was the time where Kaiser was having their nurse. I was on the nurse strike. It was the whatever strike.
Mm-hmm.
I think it wasn't the main nurses, but it was phlebotomists,
yeah.
Food services. It was everything but nurses.
The hospital's affected.
The hospital. Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh, it was super affected. So he snuck me in essentially, OR staff and stuff, snuck me in to get the surgery. But the next day, there was a strike that was happening, and that's what I may say. Nothing is ever simple.
Because it wasn't during COVID too. I feel like there
was lots of silver linings. 100%.
Yeah, that's credible.
Yeah. So then now, of course, now they had to go. They didn't have to, but it was recommended that they do a mechanical valve now. Mm-hmm. So now I've got a mechanical valve.
That lasts longer?
Allegedly.
Okay.
Allegedly, it's lifetime.
Okay.
Allegedly. It's actually what Arnold Schwarzenegger has and has had a few times. And I was like, well, if you had to have it a few times,
how many lives has he lived?
Exactly. So my uncle, who's a cardiologist, who, you can always trust that the man will give it to you straight. He goes, I said, well, at least I don't have to have surgery again. I had it when I was young, and he looks at me, he goes, lifetime? He's like, maybe the lifetime of a 70-year-old, but you're 40, girl. And I was like, yeah, you're probably right. He goes, yeah, I don't know that this has been tested on a 40-year-old.
Wow.
So he's like, I'm seeing 20, 25 years. I was like, oh, okay, well, maybe I'll still be young.
And it's scary because you've had it checked every year, and you're just waiting for the symptoms possibly.
Totally.
So you really have to be in tune with your body.
Yes.
And have a plan.
Or at least just know that I'm not going home to go lay down on the couch when I don't feel well.
100%.
It's get yourself to a hospital.
Yeah.
And if they tell me, hey, silly girl, it's because you have COVID or pneumonia, then then I have. And it's funny, as I was sitting there in the deposition, I was texting with my husband to say hey, I won't be able to do school pickup. So can you arrange for after school care? He goes, why? What's wrong? And I said, I don't know. I said, I either have COVID or pneumonia. And he's like,
fun.
Okay. He goes, so what are you going to do? I was like, well, I'm going to go to the hospital.
Yeah.
And he's like, okay. No, I said, I'll probably go to urgent care to get it checked out.
Yeah.
And then by the time I was done, I was like, yeah, I'm going to the hospital. Yeah. And he's like, okay. So yeah, I don't mess around with things like that.
Does it worry you when you leave town?
Well, it didn't before. I never did. But now I'm like, oh my gosh.
That was just last year?
Yeah. Last October. No, last September.
So it's been just over a year.
Just over a year. So yeah, it is what if I was in Europe? What if I was in Mexico? What if I was, because it wasn't something you could wait.
No, and you can flying with that. No, there's no way.
There's no way. There is no way. Once they got me stable, it would have been fine. But those first few days, I was on a massive BiPAP machine.
Mm-hmm.
They were trying to get fluid out of my body.
Yeah.
I was in bad shape. So there's just no way. I would have had surgery in Mexico.
That would be insane. Yeah. And then pulling all your records.
No, I was sitting here very carefully trying to pick what from one of these preeminent American surgeons. Mm-hmm. And you wouldn't have that, in Mexico. I'd be like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Who are these people?
Yeah.
So it is one of those things where you're like, so now what? Do I not ever go to Mexico?
What do you do? Are you living just every day at a time? Yeah. Are you trying to plan ahead for things?
I try not to do. I feel like that's one of those things where if you do live like that, you're probably putting yourself in a very fearful situation, and that can't be positive.
It's not good for your heart either.
It's not. Right? It's not good for your mental health. It's not good for. So I'm like, yes, that was a big deal, and I need to recognize that that's a possibility and an issue, and I need to be mindful of that for if something happens. but I can't let that run my life because it would ruin my life and it would ruin my kids' lives and it would ruin my husband's life. And I'm like, and I'd like, they didn't sign up for that, and that's not what I want. So
do you ever think that you try to stay busy to keep your mind off things?
no,
because
you do.
I feel like when I'm static, I think too much. And I think and then it starts.
When are you static?
That's why. Because when I say, like, if I don't have things to do, I start to, like, spiral in my head.
You worry about things?
I worry.
I'm not a worrier.
Well, that's good.
Yeah. I am not a worrier. I just assume that I always say this. I'm like, it's going to be fine.
Yeah.
Like, Miles always makes fun of me because when our second was born, he was blue. Like, first of all, he came out and we didn't even know what we were having because it was a surprise. Mm-hmm. And so the baby's born. And then I'm just sitting here going like, is someone going to tell me if it's a boy or a girl? I was like, what's the baby? Yeah. And Miles was like, hold on. The baby's blue. And I said,
oh, God.
I literally said, we're in America. The baby will be fine.
Yeah.
Is it a boy or a girl?
Oh my God.
And he just looks at me and he goes, it's a boy. So I say that all the time. I go, it'll be fine. Yeah. Everything's always fine.
It
just
is. Yeah. And sometimes when things aren't fine now, they're redeemed and they're fine later. And you're like, okay, I see why I went through that or why that happened. And
totally. And we can always justify things even if it's not.
That's very true.
But so I don't know. I try not to. And
now you have a bionic heart, right?
I have a bionic heart. They do. We always joke. Well, my youngest will say this. He'll be like, especially when I'm putting him down to sleep and it's quiet.
Yeah.
It's like, I can hear your heart. And
what does it sound like?
It's clicking. I bet if we stopped talking, it clicks.
Like every so often or just as it beats?
As every beat.
Maybe you should put it on the mic.
I'm trying to see if I can hear it as I'm sitting here. Because sometimes, like, I can hear it really, really loudly. And other times it's there, but I can't hear it as well. And when I'm busy, I can't hear it at all.
Yeah.
Honestly.
If he like lays his head on your chest, you probably hear it pretty well.
Oh yeah. If I'm laying down and nothing's happening, I can hear it.
That's kind of cool. But you kind of know, like, it's working. Things are moving in there.
I mean, it's not a pacemaker, but yes, I guess it is opening and closing.
Yeah, you're like, I'm doing something.
It is. But I feel like I would know it's not working before I realized it wasn't.
Right.
I couldn't hear it. Yeah, and now sometimes he says it, and I'm like, I don't think that's what that sound was. But it's just cute, and I think it's like he's the first person to have heard it.
Yeah.
So I think he's like, oh, that's my thing. I can hear your heart, and I was like, yeah, it's like everyone else's thing if they're sitting near me. But it's really funny. Cute. So yeah, like I have a little scar, and I have to keep it covered from the sun just so it's not horrible. But I was definitely the youngest person in that ward by about 30 years. Yeah,
I was going to say, usually hard things don't happen to people your age.
No, and the nurses were funny. They were just like, yeah, real. And I said, this is really hard, recovery, like getting out of bed and everything. And I go, I can't imagine doing this at 70. Yeah. And the nurse said to me, goes, the 70-year-old will get out of here before you do. And I was like, what? And she said, yeah. I think their nerve endings aren't as, they're not as sensitive. He goes, so they don't feel pain
really
nearly as much as you do.
Something to look forward to in life.
So I was like, oh, she goes, yeah, it's just something about, like, they have other issues, right? Like bones healing and all this sort of stuff. It's like, but the feeling of pain is not as, And he's like, and that's usually what's preventing you from making certain movements and stuff like that. Yeah. So I was like, oh, and sure enough, I was supposed to, they're like, oh yeah, you should be out of here in like 7 to 10 days. And of course I was there for 14.
Yeah.
I was there total 22 days, but 14 after surgery. And one day she came over, she goes, the 70-year-old left. And I was like,
you're here alone. Yeah.
Like, okay, cool. That's great.
Oh my God.
So when I do this again, it'll be faster. I don't know.
That's great. Well, thank you for sharing this story.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
it's definitely not. Yeah, I think people are like, oh, like, are you okay if I tell people? I'm like, yeah. I'm like, there's nothing. Like, I did want people to know from the start, because I'm like, I don't know that there's anyone else who's going to have this precise issue. No. Not super duper common. I was like, but really, listen to your body.
Yeah.
You know, if it's somewhat, if you think it's COVID or pneumonia, maybe it's heart failure, you know?
Yeah.
So perhaps you should go to the hospital.
Yeah.
And maybe you go when they say, like, you're being a hypochondriac, and you go, okay.
Yeah. I have like frequent flyer miles. I love going to the doctor.
Yeah, exactly.
I have an appointment at 4:30 today.
See, there you go. Got to make sure you get out of
it.
So
just make sure I'm okay, please.
Exactly. And of course, I'm sure there's stuff they miss or whatever it is. But it is definitely a reminder of please just keep doing what you're supposed to do. Check on yourself, check on your body, always go to your appointments. But then also, you know, if something seems wrong, don't try and sleep it off. Like, I think if I'd gone home to sleep it off, I'd be dead. But I mean, I don't know that I would have lasted that long because I would have been like, someone take me to the hospital.
Yeah.
But
and I think you're just like a beacon of like resilience and hard work and community, and that you can really do anything. You have the time for it. If she can do it, you guys, I mean, anything is possible.
It's definitely really funny
it's
for
crazy.
me. Like when people like get emails from AYSO, they're like, oh, we don't have time for this. I go, please don't ever say that to me.
I hate that line.
I know. I don't have time for that. I was like, what do you think? I have time for it? Like, just make it work.
Make it work. Yeah. If it's important to you, you make it work.
And I think that it's important to people. I just think, I don't know what it is. I mean, obviously my goal in life is to empower people to to do things, to give back to their community. And
you make that a priority in your life.
Yes.
Yeah.
So sometimes I think it's people, they think like, oh, I can't do this. Like, oh yeah, you can. Like it won't be perfect, but it's better than it not getting done at all. You know,
like when you have a baby for the first time, it's like you don't expect the amount of hours and the stress and the things, but you make it work. You figure it out.
Yep.
You do it. We all did it.
It all works out.
Yeah.
So,
well, thank you. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah.
This was lovely. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you guys for listening to another episode of the Women of Burbank, and I will see you guys next time.